Let's hear what Donald Trump had to say with Meredith Vieira this morning on the Today Show. He who knows only in his life about how to spend, encourage people to spend beyond their means. He spent himself into more than one business bankruptcy over the years, very close to personal bankruptcy in the 1990s. Yes, he's come back strong. Yes, they say he's worth a lot of money. But you want to know behind the scenes why he's worth so much money? I looked it up. Here's the genius of Donald Trump. You know the way Elizabeth Taylor died, one of the richest women in the world, because she licensed perfume? She didn't make perfume. She didn't manufacture perfume. She put her name on perfume. Well, when Donald Trump was a developer, he didn't do so well. A lot of his properties, particularly his gambling properties, ended up in bankruptcy. But because he talked himself up as such a larger-than-life brand, his brand became worth money as license on real estate. In fact, he's the only one I know who licenses real estate. Well, his licensing of real estate company is worth in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's largely run by his children. So somebody else has the headaches of getting the developer approvals. Somebody else has the headaches of manufacturing. What Donald Trump does as an organization is he goes in with certain standards, I presume, and he says, based on these standards, I am going to license the brand. And when I license the brand, that will be worth money because a buyer will know that when they buy this particular real estate property, what they get for it is a certain level of luxury, a certain level of amenities, a certain environment that I decide means the Trump brand. And his genius is that he no longer has to fund the hard costs. He's no longer ultimately liable for a lot of different lawsuits. But what he is the licensor. He's the licensor. And as the licensor, he gets a ton of revenue without a lot of the background headache. Anyway, let's hear what Donald Trump had more to say on Meredith Vieira this morning.
Doesn't have a birth certificate, or he hasn't shown it. He has what's called a certificate of live birth. That is something that's easy to get. When you want a birth certificate, it's very hard to get.
But it's considered the equivalent. And in the
it's not the equivalent.
In the state of Hawaii, they said they have seen this document. It is evidence that he was born in the United States. That's good enough for them. Scholars have looked at it.
A birth certificate is not even close. A certificate of live birth is not even signed by anybody. I saw his. I read it very carefully. Doesn't have a serial number. Doesn't have a signature. There's not even a signature.
Do you believe he's lying?
I'm starting to think that he was not born here.
Do you believe he's lying, Donald? Come on, just answer.
He spent $2 million in legal fees trying to get away from this issue. And if he weren't lying, why wouldn't he just solve it? And I wish he would.
Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the $2 million in legal fees, which I think is true. The reason that he had to spend $2 million in legal fees is because he had to defend lawsuits that wanted to put him off the petition to be able to run as president. How many other people do you know that are candidates whose legitimacy to run has been attacked in such a matter? Well, if you don't defend it, you lose by default. Right? If you don't defend it, you lose by default. What choice did he have? That's a crappy thing for Donald Trump to have said, because that's unfair. That's like when someone levels an accusation at Donald Trump that he must have done something because he got sued. Well, that's simply not true. Sometimes you get sued, and it's a frivolous lawsuit, and you have no choice but to defend it. Who knows that better than Donald Trump? So that is really an unfair thing that he just said. Let's play some more of the clip.
Why wouldn't he just solve it? And I wish he would, because if he doesn't, it's one of the greatest scams in the history of politics and in the history period. You are not allowed to be a president if you're not born in this country. He may not have been born in this country. And I'll tell you what, 3 weeks ago I thought he was born in this country. Right now I have some real doubts. I have people that actually have been studying it, and they cannot believe what they're finding.
You have people now down there searching, in Hawaii?
Absolutely, and they cannot believe what they're finding. I would like to have him show his birth certificate. And can I be honest with you? I hope he can. Because if he can't, and if he wasn't born in this country, which is a real possibility, I'm not saying it happened, I'm saying it's a real possibility, much greater than I thought 2 or 3 weeks ago, then he has pulled one of the great cons in the history of politics.
Okay, so here's what people are saying that I've been able to discover. Number one, the state of Hawaii says he was born there. The state of Hawaii says so. Now, he was born 49 years ago. if you recall your history, and Jamie or Julia, can you please look it up for me? I believe that Hawaii became part of the United States of America in 1948, but it was somewhere around there. It was later than most people realize, and so I think it was 48. It was definitely in the 40s. Anyway. Maybe it's possible because he was born in 61. Maybe, the state of Hawaii wasn't like the rest of the continental United States. And maybe their hospitals and certificates didn't look the way formal hospitals and certificates look today. I don't know. But the people in Hawaii who count have said from the get-go that he was born there. In addition to which, there are 2 newspapers that actually announced that he was born at the simultaneous time of his death, which, by the way, as a matter of evidence, is very persuasive evidence in a court of law as to something contemporaneously happening. If you can find a newspaper that announced something that happened, there's very little more persuasive than that. Because did anybody really believe 49 years ago that an interracial baby boy born in Hawaii was going to one day have to prove his birth as an American citizen for purposes of running for president? The whole idea is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So the fact is, if 1959, it became a state. Even later. That's when Hawaii became a state, August 21st, 1959? Okay. And he was born in 61. It's very possible that in those 2 short years, Hawaii did not have the same kind of formal legal requirements of a state that we have in the rest of the continental United States. There's a lot of countries and territories in this world that don't have the same kind of paperwork that we do here. I'm just saying. I mean, to me, it just occurs to me, if there's a newspaper account of his birth, if the governor of Hawaii says he was born there, if there are people in Hawaii who know the Obama family and who knew Stanley, his mother's family, are saying, I remember when he was born and he was born there, that's enough. It's enough. It's not so much about waiving a legal paper. I have my paper. Maybe he doesn't have the right kind of a paper. Maybe they didn't exist at that time. Maybe they can't find it. Maybe there was a fire. What do I know? And in the end, we have to talk about, let's say the birthers are right, because the other side of my brain goes, okay, so let's say they're right. So let's say there was a big scam. Well, he was still elected president. So let's say he was elected based on a fraudulent falsehood. That's not going to reverse our attack in Libya. That's not going to reverse our Supreme Court nominees. That's not going to roll back the last 2.5 years of time. It might obviously disqualify him going forward and probably most definitely be a grounds for impeaching him now. But I mean, come on. What are we really trying to prove here? And I have to say something else. And I just want to ask you this question to be fair. Just let's be fair. You think they'd be asking this question if he wasn't black? Just asking. He's our first black president. He happens to be interracial, but he identifies himself as black. That's another conversation. I wish he would say what he is, which is interracial. It would be fairer and more accurate. But he's entitled to call himself whatever he wants, whoever he identifies with. That's what people do. We still have that level of freedom in this country. But really, Donald Trump's mother was born in Scotland. Would it ever have occurred to anybody to question the authority, the legitimacy of Donald Trump's birth? He sounds like an American. He speaks like a New Yorker. He went to college here. How many other people have been demanded, give me your papers? This man's father was a Kenyan. Raise some eyebrows. Donald Trump's mother was a Scot. Doesn't raise any eyebrows. Let's be fair about it. I mean, let's at least be honest with ourselves, don't you think? Don't you think there's a little bit of a double standard going on here? A little bit of a look behind who he really is? Now, I am willing to say, because I believe this to be true, that as far as his faith goes, which is a totally different issue than his birth and his nationality, as far as his faith goes, I think he's being disingenuous. As much as he may protest that he has Christian beliefs, and I believe him, I do believe because he has a Muslim father that the world regards him as a Muslim. I just think that's a fact, because I know that Jews regard all Jews with a Jewish mother as Jews. Even if they convert, we say, well, you never know, he may end up in a Jewish cemetery. Never know. May not be a practicing Jew, but he was born a Jew. And I think that the Muslim world views Barack Hussein Obama that way. I I just do. But he's entitled to practice whatever faith system he wants. And we define in this country people's religion by the religion they say they are. We take people at their word. As far as his birth goes, I think there is an element of racism here. And I think it's a tempest in a teapot and a distraction from the real problems that we face, which are, number one, is he a good president, regardless of whether he was born here? And on that, I'm happy to criticize him, because I'm very disappointed in a lot of what he's said and done. And if he isn't going to be the right president, who's our alternative? Are we going to vote for Romney? Are we going to vote for Huckabee? Does anybody even know who Tim Pawlenty is? Michelle Bachmann? Who's going to run? Who's going to be the alternative to Barack Obama? That's what matters.